3, 2, 1.
Fellow American citizens, lately I've heard many ask the question, where is our leadership regarding the Democratic Party? I beg the question, where has your leadership been all along? Let's review. If you look, you have 2 impeachments, 34 plus felony counts scrapped. You have an election that miraculously beat even the numbers for Ronald Reagan, and not one voice from the Democratic Party called for maybe a recount, maybe an audit, even though there are numerous groups who have some compelling evidence that might beg the question of how legitimate was the election. But as is the case these days, the Democratic Party would prefer to play it safe and go high when they go low, as they like to say. But what has that gotten us? I've seen this throughout the debacle known as Donald Trump's tenure in our public consciousness. For example, at the height of COVID, after announcing that, yes, indeed, it was going to be a terrible, terrible thing and many lives would be lost, he made a call to Russia and asked to have supplies donated, something, by the way, the United States has never felt the need to do. And so Russia had a military plane land at JFK Airport in New York. They used the opportunity to film it so they could use it as propaganda back in Russia. You would think the Democratic Party would have had a field day with this. You would believe that they would have shown this story over and over again, because many of the companies who donated were Russian companies we had blacklisted. Of course, this is years ago, and now we know that Donald Trump donated COVID tests to Vladimir Putin when the rest of America was fighting to find them. Time and time again, we see this hypocrisy that always seems to lead to power, self-preservation, or profit. Rand Paul's wife had contributed some money to a pharmaceutical drug company that was participating in finding a solution to COVID. Now, of course, we know how Rand Paul feels about Dr. Fauci and many others. To distract us from what the government does, time and time again, they have us go after some commoner like ourselves. This is a history of the world. We far outnumber the elite and the powerful, yet we have yet to figure out how to conquer them. And so a very small minority managed to always fool the majority. That's what we see now. Over half of Americans nominated a failed real estate mogul who got his opportunity from his father, who evaded the draft because of bone spurs, and the only reason the American public sees him as anything but what he really is because of a reality show. That's how our minds think. Here in my home state of Alabama, in the 90s, Donald Trump came here when he was still a Democrat, trying to win us over about putting a casino in a building here in Mobile, Alabama, known as the GMO building. Well, of course, Alabama would hear nothing of it because we'll not have our gambling here. And they told him to take his liberal ways and get out. I have a picture of Donald Trump kissing the seal of Mobile City. But my, how times have changed, because, of course, Alabama falls on their knees and worships him. They forget who he used to be, as most of us do. There is nothing that he does that is for anyone else other than his own ego. He's not even racist because it doesn't matter that much to him either way. He is the epitome of evil. And we are the epitome of King Ahab, so to speak, falling for the Jezebel because we forget our place, and we forget our power, and we forget our obligations to a moral standing, regardless of what religion or culture you come from. There are basic tenets of decency and equality among humans, and that used to mean something, but now it doesn't. An oath is not an oath if you don't have it in signature, and who knows, that may be gone too, because now we see justice has two sides. We now see that there are some who are above the law, and all these things are only possible because democracy has a unique ability to actually vote to demolish that democracy. And that, my friend, that is what we have done. And so there is no need for anyone to cry and ask why when this happens. Even if you didn't vote for Trump, so many stayed at home indifferent. Even if you voted for Kamala Harris, how many of you have called your congressman or your senator? How many of you have called for a recount? How many of you have ever questioned the validity of anything the government tells you? I personally still am not quite sure. I believe that this is all a legitimate thing, that Joe Biden, who pressed for one of the earliest debates in presidential campaigning history, and of all times for him to have a Alzheimer's moment, he did it with that debate. Supposedly he was tired. He'd been traveling a lot. Well, then he should have fired someone, because they did not have the wherewithal to think about that and say, we need the president to be fresh on his game. And so of all the times in the world he could have had such a moment, it was that moment. True Reform Democrats panicked, and they nominated what they thought was the safest bet, Kamala Harris, because she was his vice president. So let me get this right. You see a party that essentially has told you they don't like the one black president we have. They don't like that female candidate, Hillary Clinton. So you thought, if they don't like avocados, maybe they'll like guacamole. Is that what you thought? Seems too convenient. And let's not forget, shortly after this supposed breakdown of mental faculties debate, then Donald Trump was almost assassinated. Luckily, it was just his earlobe and cartilage that were damaged. But we never heard any more about the shooter. These things are so convenient. Towards the end of the campaign, right at the end, we saw Mark Zuckerberg come out and try to slander Joe Biden and his administration. We saw CEOs of even liberal legacy media channels who had donated to Donald Trump. We saw a lot of capitulation, Joe and Mika, and then Bill Maher. So one has to wonder, why is it that Kanye West, who stood next to Michael Myers right after Katrina and said that George W. Bush was a racist, why is it he is now so big on Nazism and reconsidering how we view Hitler? When did that begin? Don't get me started on its connections to Israel. My point being, I believe there is the great possibility that they're playing a good cop, bad cop routine on us, and we're falling for it. You have to keep in mind, behind the scenes, they don't argue about voting for raise to give themselves. They have no problem with free, socialized health care when it comes to them. Are we to believe that these two are really fighting for the people? Because time and time again, we've seen, whether it was the Native Americans or African Americans or veterans, they've used us like a knot in a tug-of-war between two parties of elites, and that's it. Whether it was the Tuskegee Airmen or MK Ultra, we have an idea of what they really think of us. We're disposable. And now we seem to be comfortable with the invasion of privacy that they have not only mastered but created that would give J. Edgar Hoover wet dreams. But we don't even stop to ask ourselves, what do they do with that information? Facebook was sued for having a third party steal a lot of private data from its users. And they took that information and exclusively, only one party got that information in 2016, Donald Trump's campaign. That was it. Are we to believe that was accidental? Just a coincidence Donald Trump was involved? Project 2025 is not something that was just written overnight. These are not endeavors that just happened. While we were out chasing toilet paper at the beginning of COVID, the government decided to tell us they knew that UFOs were a thing all along, and it didn't so much as faze us when it normally would have. I continue to believe that was just a test to see if anybody was home, so to speak, comparable to opening the eye to see if they're in there. And we weren't. So one side would have you believe that you cannot trust the government at all, and you can only trust those who don't trust the government, and literally have people warning against the very vaccine they celebrated for its fast rollout, and essentially killing themselves. Highest proportion of deaths was Republicans. Seems kind of convenient to kill off your own people. Of course, the government wouldn't want people that would turn on the government and not trust them that easy, so it stands to reason some leadership might want to find a way to get rid of those people. If governments could have any superpower, I've always said I think it would be mind reading. Because that way they could know what their constituents and their citizens were thinking. Like a captain on a ship might fear being overthrown or mutiny. So you'd want to know what they were thinking. Well, the United States government has the capability to do that, courtesy of Google and Facebook. That's why they ask you, would you like to log in with their credentials on every website? Because once you do, then you've given them permission to track you. And what do you think they do with that information that they track you with? But more important than knowing what you think or how you feel is controlling what you think and how you feel, which they are able to do now with what we call algorithms, echo chambers. But first they have to know what your sweet spot is, what is your trigger. And then they can divide you and keep you separated. There's a whole world for Republicans versus Democrats in social land, and that's where most people spend their time. We're just like fish in a barrel. There's a group for every belief you can think of. One side wants you to only believe in conspiracies and to believe that you have a religious duty to your country. The other side wants you to believe that religion is all to blame for what we're going through now, and that if you even remotely consider conspiracy theories, then you're an idiot. The other side wants you to turn your back on education, even though they themselves went to Ivy League colleges. So let's get this right. They want you with no faith. They want you with no trust. They want you with no independent ability to question or research. And they don't want you to be smart enough to consider doing any of those things. Wow, almost seems like a concerted effort. And finally, let's not forget the narrative Democrats gave us. It's up to you now, voters. The fate of our nation rests solely in your hands. They put the onus all on us, and we failed. They've pumped our society full of guns. Anybody can have one, and then divided us, scared us. And just as soon as that wildfire starts, don't be surprised when they call martial law, because they'll say to us, we can't give you your freedoms back. You can't be trusted with it. You're too dangerous. So, indeed, the question is, where has your leadership been all along?